What's up, Campus Live fans, and welcome to the Campus Live Sports Show here live at GolfSuites here in beautiful Lubbock, Texas. My name is Logan, as always, here with Lane, as we're going to get you set up for everything you need to know about today's matchup between the 7th ranked team in the country, the Texas Tech Red Raiders, and the Arizona State Sun Devils. Lane, it's another great Saturday. How you feeling this week?
I'm feeling great. You know, we're 6-0, the number 7 team ranked in the whole entire country after last week's awesome win over Kansas, and we got a really big one today at Arizona State, and I'm excited to get this show started, Logan.
Yeah, definitely. Before we start, I want to take another quick second to thank Roof Master of Lubbock and Paint Doctor, as this show is powered by both, and they are amazing partners for Campus Live. Make sure if y'all need any restoration needs on your roof, any damages, call Roof Master of Lubbock or on their website at roofmasterlubbock.com. as well as a huge giveaway, as we are partnered with Paint Doctor today. And in the fourth quarter of today's game, we'll be giving a massive giveaway basket worth $200 of Visa with a Visa gift card, a $75 gift card to Red Robin, and some Texas Tech swag items. You can find us at our Campus Live table here at GolfSuites to enter. We'll have some people there that'll get you all set up. I mean, Lane, that's a pretty big giveaway.
I mean, yeah. $200 and a $75 gift card to Red Robin. I mean, I'm going to enter in that thing, Logan.
Yeah, me too. All right, let's get right into things. We got a huge matchup. The preseason, arguably Big 12 favorite in Arizona State, as well as last year's Big 12 champions. Texas Tech will go on the road after picking up the big win at home last week over Kansas. Let's recap a little bit of that Kansas game. What were some things that stood out to you?
Yeah, you know, it was another 24-point win, you know, just racking them up as it seems like every single game this year. And, you know, we started the game really hot on a 21-0 run. And then, you know, we talked about it earlier this week on our podcast, Logan, but when Baron Morton got hurt, it kind of seemed like the wind went out of everyone's sails, not just on the team, but kind of in the stadium, you know. And then Kansas, they went on a 17-0 run, and right before halftime, you know, there was kind of some nerves in the stadium. You could feel, you know, the pressure that we really haven't felt all season. But you know, Will Hammond, after he came in, he finally settled down and came in for relief for Barron, and he actually ended up rushing for two rushing touchdowns. You know, he wasn't too effective with his arm, but it really didn't matter because I think, you know, we can all agree the story of the game was Cameron Dickey, and 21 rushes for 263 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was even awarded the Walter Camp National Offensive Player of the Week. And even though we didn't pass it that well, we only had 133 yards passing. We still had 505 yards of offense. And, you know, I think it just shows in how many ways we can win with this team. One week we can throw for 400 yards. The next week we can only throw for basically 100 and still have over 500 yards rushing, Logan. And I think you're going to talk a little bit more about the defense, you know, just how they kind of saw their first resistance of the season, but really bounced back in the second half.
Yeah, the defense had their first little hiccup of the season. You could say they dominated the first quarter. You know, like you said, when Barron came out, a lot of the momentum that Texas Tech had built in that 21-0 run really faded away. And so the defense lost their footing a little bit. You lost Skylar Gill-Howard, who we're going to lose for the rest of the regular season. Hopefully we get him back for a playoff run as, you know, later in the season. But that was a big loss, as that has been the leader all season long for them. And so to not have him, it was a big loss. And I think that had something to do with the defense, you know, not being able to, not to have their full strength starting lineup and, you know, not their leader on defense. But after that, like you're saying, after that second quarter where they gave up 17 unanswered, it was back to the normal defense. A.J. Holmes, he stepped into that role. Skylar Gill-Howard next to Lee Hunter, you know, had a sack, a huge one late in the game. The defense just stepped up overall. The back end has been absolutely amazing. Jalen Daniels found some success, 2 passing touchdowns there in that second quarter. But other than that, they were pretty much stifling the Kansas receivers. But they're going to face their biggest test today in Jordan Tyson, who's arguably a top 10 pick in the NFL draft this upcoming season. But you got 2 of the best defensive edge rushers in the entire country, number 2 and 3 behind Ruben Bain, which may fall down after Miami's loss last night. We may have number 1 in David Bailey after today's game. But the thing I think we talked about on the podcast that really stood out to me, the 0 PFF grade on the tackles for Kansas. I know I've talked about that on both the podcast and now, but that is something unheard of in PFF grading, the era of that. And to just have both of them have 0 grades just tells you how good that Romello Height and David Bailey have been. Those 2 guys for me are probably, and again, We haven't even talked about Jacob Rodriguez,
Yeah.
who just got put out as CBS's #2 player in the entire country this year. That just tells you how good he's been, and arguably on a way to another Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah, and we say, they saw the first resistance, but, we're not going to hold everyone to 0 points all year. And Jalen Daniels is a great quarterback. You could argue he is the best quarterback in the Big 12, and he did have a decent game. He was 27 of 33 for 255 and 2 touchdowns. But, I think what impressed me the most is the way that we bounced back in the second half and held them to a shutout. After they saw so much success in the second quarter, our defense stepped up, made the right adjustments, and that's what was so positive to me, especially like we've talked about with David Bailey and Romello Height. They absolutely took this game over. They both had 5 sacks between the both of them. And then, of course, talking about Jacob Rodriguez, he really didn't get the
flashy plays,
but he still ended up with 14 tackles and a sack. I mean, that's just like an average game for him. He didn't have his token interception. It seems like he's had every single game this year. But how about A.J. Holmes, stepping up for Skylar Gill-Howard? He came in for him, still got 2 sacks. And, I think with Skylar's injury, he is now going to be one of the most important players on this whole entire team, because he's got to maintain at least to like 90% the level that Skylar was playing at to reach the ceiling of this whole entire season and the whole entire ceiling of this roster, Logan. And but he's a great player, and the way that he showed it against Kansas, I have no doubt that him and also Jaden Cofield, he's a great player as well. It's going to be a mix of both of them with Skylar out, but I have no doubt that they'll be able to hold over until hopefully Skylar can come back. Yeah.
Main person that you talked about, A.J. Holmes, but Duda Banks and Jaden Cofield are probably now the 2 most important backups in the entire team, because we've seen them filter in those defensive tackles as well as and be able to replace. If anybody can do it, it's those 3 guys that are really going to have to make that up. But before we get any farther, I want to take a quick second to give a little special here at Golf Suites. You'll get 30% off all your Christmas booking events if you book before October the 15th. So get on here at the Golf Suites website, or find someone here if you're at the show, and get those Christmas events booked for 30% off. I think another thing as we get back into it, we had a streak of all games this season except for Kansas where we had gained the opposing offense by 200. Well, that streak is over. It was 184 yards that we outgained them by.
Yeah.
About as close as you could get without hitting the 200 mark. But I think the real game, like you're talking about, where it was won, 372 rushing yards to 74 rushing yards.
Yeah.
That's where the game was won. It was built in the trenches. And in the offseason, we talked about that. I mean, you outgained them by 298 yards on the ground. That's going to win you a lot of football games.
And I think that, and we'll touch on it later, is as a key to victory in today's game, especially being on the road, it's exactly what we did against Utah. Is even though Will came in and he was slinging it all over the field when Barron got hurt, we ran the ball so well in that game and basically just led on our offensive line and our running game at the end of that game, and expanded our lead all the way to the 34-10 win that we had. And I think you're going to see a similar approach today, and we'll touch more on it later, but like I said, but I think you're going to see an approach where, once again, focusing on running the ball, continuing to find success in the running game, but also you'll see the occasional deep shot from Will Hammond, because that's what his bread and butter is. He's a great deep ball thrower. And I think that, especially on the offensive side of the ball today, to go into Arizona State, their backs are going to be against the wall. They're going to throw everything they have at us. I think that being effectively running the ball, which is what we've done all season, is how we're going to win this game today.
Yeah, and arguably the worst loss since the game was over. And to not expect them to come into this game today and not play the best game of the season, I'm expecting them to go all out and have the best game that they played all season. But Texas Tech's better in every aspect of the game, from special teams to offense to defense. They have better players on their roster on the all season. There's a reason why we are arguably, close to the top five. But with Sam Levis, there's a big question mark. We'll talk about a little bit more because how healthy is he? And we're going to talk a little more about that when we talk about Arizona State. If they are injury riddled today, obviously we have, Charlotte and Howard, a couple guys out, but our main core is attack today. No, we're going to talk a lot more about that position today. We'll see how that goes. But anything to add on Kansas?
Yeah, and I think Will having his first game starting today, I think not just for the rest of this season because we're gonna need him. I'm probably gonna need him again. Also for next year too, having the experience, he's already went to a tough environment in Utah, but now going into Arizona State being the starter, I think that this is an opportunity for him to just even more so establish himself on this team. And I'm so looking forward to Will today, him starting and just seeing how Mac Leftwich calls this game, and I'm really excited to see just how we operate in a really tough environment out there in Tempe.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun game, and I mean, we're about 40 to 15 minutes away from kickoff, and that's going to wrap up our first segment of the Campus Live Sports Show here live at GolfSuites. Again, just want to take a quick second to thank Roof Master of Lubbock as well as Big Doctor for powering the show today. Remember, if you have any restoration needs, both on your roof or on your vehicle, Big Doctor and Roof Master of Lubbock will take care of all of your needs at roofmasteroflubbock.com or Big Doctor as in the house. Come out and join. Again, huge giveaway. Find our Campus Live table $200 each gift card, $75 to Red Robin, as well as some big Texas Tech gear. And one last big deal here at GolfSuites. Day specials we talked about on every show. Extra large pizza, pitcher of beer, and an hour of golf for just $50. Come out and join us. We've got 3 segments left. All things Texas Tech in the next segment. I know me and Lane have talked for days about that. Make sure you come join us here or online. If y'all stay tuned. And as always, Recco. roof, damage or restoration needs, make sure you know roofmaster.com, as well as let's.com. We have great giveaways on today. Make sure you find the Campus Life Table and enter $200 Visa gift card, $75 for Red Robin, and some great Texas Tech merchandise. All a part of a giveaway basket. Man, I can't wait to enter. I want that gift card. We're going to do all things Texas Tech in this segment. Lane, let us know what we need to know if you have never watched the Red Raiders play.
Yeah, and if you didn't see part one, we kind of went a little head on this, but, we're 6-0 on this season. We're now ranked the number 7 team in the whole entire country, and, we've been absolutely dominant this year. We're top 5 in both in offense and defense, and basically every statistical category that you can find, and we've won every single game this year by 24-plus points, and after already seeing number 2 Miami go down this week, this is a great opportunity for Texas Tech to jump in the top 5 for the first time since 2009 or 8.
Long
excuse me,
time, man.
And it's been a really long time, and we're going to continue to make a statement to the whole entire country, I think, this week. But Will Hammond is getting the start today. If you haven't heard yet, Baron Morton is our starter, but he's down with an injury today, and he's basically only going to be used if for emergency. It's going to be Will Hammond starting and Mitch Griffiths as the backup. So, he's been pretty much absolute fireworks this whole season, besides a few plays for Will this whole entire year. So I'm really excited to see how he's going to play. And, the past few weeks, unfortunately, the injury bug has kind of hit us. We talked about in the first segment with Skylar Gill-Howard now being out for the rest of the regular season. Hopefully we can get him back for a deep playoff run. And with Barron getting hurt, we thought we were going to get Chapman Lewis back in the secondary this week, but it looks like he's still going to be out. But we do get our speedy punt and kick returner Tristan Gentry back after he missed a few games. And everyone else, though, seems like they're ready to go. And, at this point in the season, everyone's got bumps and bruises and stuff, but it's all about avoiding those big injuries. So as much depth as this team has, I think that we're going to continue to push and continue to dominate people in the Big 12. But, we can't afford for any more guys to go down if we want a deep playoff push. But, I'm not worried about this team, and I think that they're going to put on another great display on the field today.
Yeah, we have arguably, we talked about it, the most talented team on both sides of the football. The defense gets all the talk now because you've never seen a Big 12 defense the way that Texas Tech has performed so far this season. Arguably the best defense in 15 years for Texas Tech. But the offense is just as much firepower as the defense does. I mean, they lead the Big 12 in total offense, 558 yards a game, which is outrageous. That's an outrageous number. We talked about it. They had a streak of 5 games where they outgained their opponent by 200-plus yards. Now it's all 6 by 180-plus. So, I mean, at that point, the thing that sticks out, like you said, you talked about it in our podcast this week. When Will Hammond's on the field, they are averaging over 7 yards per carry. Not saying when Barron's on the field, they're averaging over 5 yards per carry, which is still great. Yeah. But he just adds a different dynamic. You're going to see a lot more read option type plays, design QB runs out of Will Hammond today from Mac Leftwich. And what we saw when we played Utah and then the second half against Kansas is it seems like this offense really opens up with Will Hammond at the helm. He gives you a little bit of a different speed to deal with as a defense. When you pair him with Cam Dickey and Jacoby Williams in that backfield, the run game is going to be absolutely amazing. And I expect them to run just as much as they did last week. But Arizona State, much better run defense than Kansas was. However, when you got the receivers who didn't even have a real impact in last week's game, they're going to have an impact today because they're going to have to be able to throw the ball on third down. But Will Hammond's going to be really good, in my opinion. I think that he is the future of Texas Tech football. We've discussed that before. But it's his time now. He's going to have to step up again like he did against Utah. But we've seen it over and over so far this season. He is willing to step into that role and play effectively.
Yeah, and I think, as we head into our keys to victory for this game, I think that you're going to probably see a similar approach with Coach Leftwich, probably easing Will into this game because it is such a tough environment. We're heading into the reigning Big 12 champs house, and, they have a great coach. They have a great quarterback. They got maybe the best receiver in the whole entire country, not named Jeremiah Smith, and they do have a good defense. And, I think that we're going to probably use Will's legs alongside our stout running game at the beginning of this game. Just ease the nerves for Will. But I think, this is also definitely a great opportunity to bounce back in the passing game as well. Will can sling it all over the field. But I think, one of the most important things for this whole entire game is our offensive line must protect him. Arizona State's actually, they're only just behind Texas Tech in the Big 12 as far as sacks. They have 19.5 sacks versus our 21.5 sacks. So their defensive line is very good at generating pressure and, holding off the pass rush whenever you have a young quarterback in the game, especially on the road where he isn't rushed. It's going to be very, very important. You saw it against Utah. Our offensive line protected him really well in that second half. He had time to throw and make those quick decisions. But, on the flip side, maybe this is a game where Will benefits a lot from it because of such a gifted runner that he is compared to Barron. Barron's a more pocket passer. But I think Will being protected, hitting the easy ones at the beginning of the game, his easy reads, and also using his legs, I think will ease off probably a more loaded box you'll see from Arizona State because they know how well our running game is. But I think that on the offensive side, you're going to see that type of game plan, and I think that's going to be a few of the keys to victory for Texas Tech today.
One thing that we really haven't touched on, since the game, but last time we were in a very hostile environment, Texas Tech did not handle it very well on offense.
Yeah.
13 false starts, a lot of penalties in that game, gave them almost 2 football fields worth of penalties and still won by 24 points. But that's something I'm looking for today. Is the offense able to, stay disciplined, no pre-snap penalties, the in the play penalties, they're going to happen. You try to limit those, but the pre-snap ones are really what I'm looking for. The false starts, the offsides, those kind of things as a team. I know Coach McGuire is going to harp on it, Coach Leftwich, and especially Coach Wood, because Coach Wood, that man, he's going to make sure he drills that into you. That's not gonna play here at Texas Tech, but that's something that I really am looking for. And then when we move to the defensive side of things, I think it's just going to be a very clear-cut, tape for Texas Tech. You know what you're getting.
Yep.
You're getting dynamic defensive line, a very stingy defensive back room, and some of the most elite linebackers in the entire country. I think that David Bailey, Romello Height, Lee Hunter, and Jacob Rodriguez, those guys are going to dominate the run game because I do think that they're going to try to run the football more early for Arizona State, but we're going to know real early. How is Sam Levitt? Can he move around? If he can't move around, it's going to be a long, long night for the Sun Devils. I like our chances either way, but David Bailey's going to be the guy. I would not be surprised if David Bailey has 3 or 4 sacks in this game.
Yeah, with Arizona State missing so many guys, they have 14 guys out from injuries today, including 3 of their starting offensive linemen. And, with Skylar Howard out, I'm really interested to see what types of look that Coach Wood displays on the field today. Really this year we haven't had to dial up much pressure from other guys besides our defensive line because they've been so dominant. I think today is a day where you might see Coach Wood try to dial up some more exotic looks than we've seen this whole entire season because already with an injured Sam Levitt, he's got an ankle injury, trying to speed him up and basically make him a runner. He is a great runner, but having a bad ankle against our defense, I think it could force him to create some turnovers, similarly to what we did to Devin Dampier when we were out in Utah, forcing him to make bad decisions and force it into tight windows. But I think really the key to this game for our defense is staying assignment sound on Jordan Tyson. With our secondary, they've played amazing this whole entire season, but last week they did get tested a little bit and they did give up some points. And Jordan Tyson's a guy that he can single-handedly carry an offense. That's how talented this guy is if he gets hot early in this game. And, Arizona State can run the ball really well. They're actually ranked 27th in the country rushing the ball this year. They're averaging about 204 yards per game. So with Skylar Howard out, we talked about it earlier. I think A.J. Holmes and alongside with Lee Hunter, they're going to have to be absolute anchors in the run game today and basically force Arizona State into obvious passing downs where we can unleash our pass rushers with David Bailey and Romello Height.
Yeah, I think that it's a pretty clear-cut, game plan for Coach Wood, and they've dominated every game they played in. I think the thing that people don't understand is you can't really scheme for this Texas Tech defense.
Yeah.
You can see it on film. You see how good and how fast they are, but when you go out there and play them, it just seems like the teams are really stunned with how fast, how strong, and how physical they are up front, especially. I mean, I think something that's really stood out is last year you had Jacob Rodriguez win Defensive Player of the Year. Now he's even better because you have Lee Hunter, A.J. Holmes, Skylar Howard taking up two defenders. They're not letting those defenders get to the second level in the run game, and him and Ben Roberts have been able to do it. John Curry on the outside, again, is going to be pivotal in the tackling as a quick game that they like to throw outside to Tyson. There's going to be some big plays that are going to happen. Tyson's going to get his. I would not be surprised if he has 100 yards receiving. But if you could limit him to, one or two touchdowns. I mean, I'm thinking that Texas Tech's going to have to give up some points today. That's how good Sam Levitt and Jordan Tyson are. But I would not be surprised if they also piss a shutout. This game can go both ways. I think we're going to talk about it in our last segment of what we think, but it could go both ways.
Yeah, and I think too something that could help out our defense is something that actually we've struggled with this year is scoring touchdowns in the red zone. And the past few games, and even Coach McGuire has talked about it on his weekly shows and stuff that, we have had to kick a lot of field goals in the past few weeks. And I think putting the ball in the end zone today in a really tough environment, going on long drives instead of settling for field goals, not only does it help out our young quarterback with Will, not potentially having to chase points, but it helps our defense out too. If we go out, take the ball like we did against Utah and go score 7 real quick at the beginning of the game, that helps out our defense so much. And I think that is really going to be a point of what we really need to do today, because I think that this might be the most important game of the whole entire season at this point, because Arizona State, their backs are against the wall, and they do only have one Big 12 loss. So if they were to somehow beat us today and we ended up with only one Big 12 loss, that could end up hurting us at the end of the year if they went to run the table with their schedule. So I'm really excited to see what we put on the field today, and I think it should be a good game for us, though.
Yeah, I think so as well. That's going to wrap up our second segment of the Campus Live Sports Show here live at GolfSuites. Remember, come out and join us. $2 draft beers all day long, as well as the game day special. Extra large pizza, pitcher of beer, and 1 hour of golf for just $50. Make sure y'all come out too, as we're partnered with Paint Doctor with a great giveaway. $200 Visa gift card, $75 gift card to Red Robin, and some great merchandise, Texas Tech merchandise, as well as another big thank you to Roofmaster of Lubbock for powering this show. Make sure if you need any needs on your roofing needs, contact roofmasteroflubbock.com. Make sure that you stay tuned, as we have 2 more segments. Next segment, all things Arizona State. If you haven't watched them play, they're extremely talented. You've gotten a little bit of a hint from us so far. We'll go in depth on what you need to know and who you need to know on the opposing side. 30 minutes away from kickoff in Tempe, Arizona. So make sure y'all stay here and come join us here at GolfSuites. And as always, wreck 'em.
Wreck 'em.
Welcome back, Campus Live fans, to our third segment here of the Campus Live Sports Show here live at GolfSuites here in Lubbock, Texas. Two great segments. We talked all things Texas Tech. If you hadn't ever watched Texas Tech, now you know everybody you need to know. We're going to do the same thing with Arizona State, but before we get into any of that, again, want to take another second to thank Roofmaster of Lubbock for powering this show. If you need any roof repair, anything roof related, roofmasterlubbock.com is the place for you. Also, we're partnering with Paint Doctor for a massive giveaway basket, $200 Visa gift card, $75 to Red Robin, and some great merchandise for Texas Tech as you get ready to watch number 7 Texas Tech travel to Tempe, Arizona to take on the Arizona State Sun Devils. Again, one more thing here at GolfSuites. Make sure you come out and get the game day special. Extra large pizza, a pitcher of beer, and an hour of golf, all for just $50. Make sure you come out and find the Campus Live table for the giveaway as well. And Lane, let's get into it.
Yeah.
I know we talked a little bit about Sam Levin and Jordan Tyson already, but they got a plethora of big-time players on that team. Injury-riddled and a big-time guy that they had to replace in Cam Scadaboo. Who are the guys we need to know on the offensive side of the football?
Yeah, Arizona State, they're 4-2. Like we said, they only have one conference loss, and it was actually last week to Utah. But Sam Levitt wasn't playing in that game, and whenever Jeff Sims has had to start for them in the past, it has not looked very pretty, and they got blown off the field last week. But, they went to the playoffs last year, and they are the reigning Big 12 champs, and we were actually one of the only teams last year that actually beat them, and we actually did so pretty handedly. And that was with Cam Scadaboo, but this is the game that they have had circled, I think, on their calendar all year. We really kind of handled them last year, and I think that they're going to want to get their revenge today. And, you heard even during the offseason from Kenny Dillingham and Sam Levitt, they both said, this is the game that we're circling against Texas Tech on our schedule. But I think the story, honestly, of their season has probably been their injuries. Like we said earlier, they have 14 guys out right now, and including a guy, Kyson Brown, a guy that replaced Cam Scadaboo, Xavier Alford, he's a starting safety for them, and Zyrus Fiasu, he's their best linebacker, and then, of course, 3 of their starting offensive linemen today that they're all missing. But this is still a very talented team. They basically returned their whole entire team from last year besides Scadaboo, and they went to the playoffs last year and almost beat a really good Texas team in the quarterfinals. So, I think even though that they did return so much talent, they have kind of struggled in the passing game, and especially on offense this year. They're only averaging 194 passing yards per game this year, and they returned so much talent, even with Jordan Tyson and Sam Levitt. They've really struggled, but they've leaned on their running game, even without Cam Scadaboo, with guys like Raleek Brown and Canyon Uda. They've had really good years, and Sam Levitt has had a really good year with his legs as well. But, I think in today's game, I think you're really going to see them lean on their run game a lot. And I think that obviously they're going to try to give Jordan Tyson the ball a lot as well, just because of as talented as he is. But they're not going to make their offensive line today try to sit back and protect Sam Levitt for 5 seconds, because that's a recipe for disaster for Arizona State.
Yeah, it is. And it seems like a common occurrence. We talked about it with the Texas Tech side, with these teams trying to get the ball out wide quick or run the football. But with the interior defensive line that Texas Tech has, the running game has not been easy, as they are one of the nation's best in the run game as well. I think that you're going to see a mix of both. They're going to try to run the football a lot, but they're going to have to throw the ball to beat this Texas Tech team, because technically, the secondary is technically the worst part of the Texas Tech defense, still top 10 in the country, as they also have the number 2 coverage grade in the entire country according to PFF, except every other stat is number 1. So pick your poison with the Texas Tech defense. I think that's something that stood out. In 2024, the reason Arizona State was so good, Cam Scadaboo was a big thing, but they did not turn the ball over. They were top 5 in the nation in the fewest turnovers. This season hasn't been the same there, but they've had a hard time replacing Cam Scadaboo in both the pass game and the run game. They've got a couple guys, like you said, Kane Yehudo, who is coming back from injury. He is projected to play today. I fully expect him to get a bulk of the carries. It's just going to be very hard to imagine a Texas Tech defensive line allowing them to run all over them. And Shiel Wood, he just has that knack of keeping teams behind the sticks and putting them in obvious pass situations, which obviously Texas Tech has thrived in all year. But I think the thing that's really going to see is Arizona State on the defensive side of the football. They did return 9 starters for 2024. They have the experience. But it's just going to be something about, can they stop Texas Tech, both in the run and the pass game? They are one of the Big 12's best run-stopping teams. Obviously, Texas Tech coming off the biggest or the best run performance that they have had this season. I do think, like you said, Texas Tech's going to feel Will Hammond into this game, but the read options, I think, are just too much for this team.
Yeah, and I think another thing too, before I go on more onto their defense, I think that something that they've really struggled with Arizona State this year is finding their replacement for their second pass catcher. Scadaboo was such a good receiver out of the backfield last year. Besides Jordan Tyson, they really do not have another receiving threat. Their second leading receiver this year is actually their tight end, Chamoy Mestayer, and he only has 160 yards receiving this year. Their next receiver only has 5 receptions for 105 yards. That is not good. And I think that's where you're going to see Shieldwood attack is I think you're going to see a lot of double teams on Jordan Tyson. They're going to make Sam Levitt throw it to other people besides Jordan Tyson and make other guys beat him because, in my opinion, I don't think that they can with their other guys. As that's just what we've seen so far this year. And I think that going back over to Arizona State's defense, I think we touched on it earlier. This is going to be a day where our offensive line is going to have to play exactly how they did last week against Utah. They've got to protect Will. They've got to open up the running game. Even if it gets stifled in the beginning of the game, how in tough road environments sometimes that happens in the beginning of the game, just sticking to our plan, and then I think that we'll have success and we'll end up winning this game.
Yeah, I think that, like we were talking about, it's going to be interesting how Mac Leftwich attacks that defense. As like we were saying, they're one of the best in the run game. After coming off a game where you almost rushed for 400 yards, you're going to want to run the football just as much in this game. But I do think that you got to give the threat of Will Hammond that you show that you trust him to throw the football around the yard. So maybe we see, hopefully early, a couple plays downfield. Even if you don't complete them, the threat of throwing it downfield to Reggie Virgil or Caleb Douglas just changes things for a defensive coordinator for the rest of the game. I think that's going to be something I really want to look out for. And they've had a really good turnover margin. I talked about it on the offensive side for them. They're really good at not turning the football over last season. Well, last season they were really good at turning the ball over on the defensive side of the football. So I really want to see, can Will Hammond protect the football? He's done a great job. So we had one bad interception last week trying to push the ball down the field. But that's going to be something also that don't give them any more momentum. They're at home. They have the crowd. If you can stifle that crowd early, this game's going to be over pretty soon. They're, depleted. Sam Levitt may come out early. This game's bad. This is bad. But their backs are against the wall. You said it multiple times. They have to win this football game for any hope at a Big 12 championship. So I expect them to play their best. Before we get any further, I want to take a quick second and for GolfSuites here, make sure that you check out their Instagram page as they have themed trivia and cash bingo every month. The dates will be on their Instagram. Come out and enjoy, with the great specials that we've already announced. Make sure y'all come out and check that out. But we've talked about it. Cam Scadabo, man, it's been a huge loss. We talked about it in the preseason on our shows, but it's just really come full circle.
Yeah, and I think, he was a part of, like you spoke on earlier, them being able to protect the ball so well. That guy, he's such a monster. I mean, he's like a moving bowling ball running down the field. It's just impossible to tackle him, and he has hands like a receiver, and I think that they're really missing that right now. But I think, going back to our offense, I completely agree with what you said. We're going to have to be able to throw the ball if we want to win this game today. And I think, once again, you're going to see probably Coach Leftwich give Will some easy throws in the beginning of this game, get his legs under him, get the momentum going, and then obviously lean on our run game at the end of this game and try to expand our lead or, run out the clock if the game is close. But yeah, I'm really interested to see, and I think today should be success, but we'll give our predictions in the next segment though. Yeah.
Last thing I want to talk about when it comes to Arizona State, they've had massive kicking issues the last 2 seasons. Yeah. They've not been good. We even saw Coach Dillingham last year telling them to bring some students out for some tryouts because of how bad their kicking game was. Still got them to the playoffs. They brought in Jesus Gomez from Eastern Michigan. He's really helped stabilize that a little bit. But if this is a close game heading to the end of the game, will that affect Arizona State? I hope we don't get to that point. I don't expect it to get to that point, but there's always that thing on the road, tricky game against a really talented team. The kicking game, again, I said this when we played Utah, we have the advantage in special teams. I think we do again today.
Yeah, and speaking on that, actually their punter is one of the people that's on their injury list right now. and he's questionable for this game. And if they don't have their punter today, you got to wonder if they're just going to go for the majority of the fourth downs that they have, unless it's like a 4th and 10, 4th and 15. I think that's a very interesting caveat of this game. If their punter is not going to be able to play today, I think you're going to see Kenny Dillingham be extremely aggressive on 4th down.
Yeah, I think so as well. That's going to wrap things up for our third segment. Make sure you stay tuned as we're going to give pick'ems for not only this game, but the major games around the country in our next segment. Make sure you come out and join us for our fourth segment as well as to watch the game. Make sure you enter the giveaway whether we are partnered with Paint Doctors. Our $200 Visa gift card, $75 to Red Robin, and some great Texas Tech merchandise, as well as some game day deals here at GolfSuites. Extra large pizza, pitcher of beer, and an hour of golf for $50, as well as the best deal in town, $2 draft beer all day long. Come out and watch the Red Raiders as they travel to Tempe, Arizona to take on the Arizona State Sun Devils. And as always, wreck 'em.
Wreck 'em.
What's up, Campus Live fans, and welcome to our fourth and final segment of the Campus Live Sports Show here live at GolfSuites here in Lubbock, Texas. We've had a great show so far. We gave you everything you needed to know when watching the game today, the players to know for both sides as well. But this is probably the most fun segment of the show. We're going to pick both this game as well as four other games, something like that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of big games this week. But before we get into that, I want to take a quick second to thank GolfSuites again, as well as Roof Master of Lubbock for powering the show, as well as the big time giveaway we're giving with Paint Doctor, $200 Visa gift card, $75 to Red Robin, as well as some great merchandise. Come find the Campus Live table here at GolfSuites to enter. And Lane, I think you should get us started on this one.
Yeah, and this game, we can't really tell if this game's kicked off or not, but we'll go ahead and talk about it. Ole Miss and Georgia, this is one of the biggest games in the SEC this year. I think, Ole Miss, after they had a really bad week last week, they really should have lost to Washington State. I think that they bounce back this week, though. I think they play much better. I think that they catch Georgia off guard early in this game, go up like 10-0, 14-0. But Georgia, after all the controversy at Auburn this past week, it seems that whenever they play bad, Georgia, Kirby Smart, he just always gets them right. I think that they bounce back and they adjust. They seem to always go down, though, in every single game that they play, every big game. But I think that Trinidad Chambliss for Ole Miss, he still has a great game. But I think Georgia, with Nate Frazier in their running game, I think they're just so tough at home. I think it's going to be really tough for Ole Miss to actually win this game. I think they cover, though. But I think it's going to be 27-24 Georgia.
Right before this, we talked about who we're going to pick. I think I'm going to have to switch my pick. I think Georgia's just too good, man.
Yeah.
Like, at home against Ole Miss after what I saw last week, I think Georgia's going to win this game.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be extremely close, 20. I think it's going to be 30-27. But that's my pick there.
Yeah.
All right, you want me to move on to the next one here?
Yeah.
All right, let's go to number 11, Tennessee, heading to Tuscaloosa, Alabama to take on the number 6 ranked Alabama Crimson Tide. I do think we probably agree on this one. You go ahead. Yeah,
in Tennessee, they actually have won this game the past 2 out of 3 years after they didn't win for like 15 years. But they have won this game the past 2 out of 3 years, but I think this is going to be Bama rolling all day today. I think, Tennessee's defense is not nearly as good as it has been the past few years. I think Ty Simpson right now is the Heisman favorite. I think he throws for 350 yards, and I think that they win 42-24 over Tennessee.
Yeah, I'm rolling with the Tide today. I think Alabama is going to dominate in the pass game. I think that Tennessee has a really good offense. We've seen it. Joey Aguilar's been great this season. He's got a lot of weapons on the outside. I just don't trust their defense against arguably one of the best passing teams in the country. Ty Simpson, like you said, Heisman favorite this year. I think he has a massive day. I think that Alabama just runs away with this one. I think it's probably, I'm going to go 48-37. I think that's the score.
Yeah. And then moving on to another huge game, USC and Notre Dame. This is a big rivalry game that they play every single year. USC, they came off a huge victory against Michigan last week. I think, we kind of talked about it on our podcast this week. I think Lincoln Riley's finally starting to figure some things out there in Southern California. They finally have got their feet under them with the whole NIL deal and everything. And with Jaden Mayava, Mekhi Lemon, Jacoby Lane, Lincoln Riley's always going to have an offense, but I think this offense this year is really, really good. And with their second year having D'Anton Lynn as their defensive coordinator, he's much better. I think this spread is like 10.5 right now. I think that's way too many points. But I think that this is going to be a really high-scoring affair. But just because Notre Dame is at home and how their offense has been rolling lately with C.J. Carr, I think that they win a very close one, 34-31, leaning on their run game with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price.
I tend to agree with what you said. USC, again, major offense, man. They've been really good. Jaden Mayava, Mekhi Lemon. We talked about it on our podcast this week, like you said. Lincoln Riley gets his guy in with Jaden Mayava at quarterback. He's developed him. He's been one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Mekhi Lemon inserted himself into a top 10 pick, but I'm rolling with the Irish. It's Notre Dame all the way. I think C.J. Carr, Jeremiah Love are too much for that defense. Lincoln Riley's never had the best defense at any school he's been. This one's much better than he's had in the past, but C.J. Carr and I think, like you said, Jeremiah Love's too much for him. The Holy War, Big 12 title game implications here. Number 23, Utah travels to BYU, number 15 in the country in BYU. I think this game really determines who meets Texas Tech in the conference championship game. BYU, undefeated, a lot of hype. They have not played the three favorites besides with Texas Tech, obviously today in Utah, as well as Cincinnati.
Yeah.
They played all three in the coming weeks. It all starts with number 23, Utah. Devin Dampier, man. I gotta go. I'm going Utah just because of him. I trust him more than the true freshman in Bear Bachmeier.
Yeah, this is the first ranked Holy War, believe it or not, in 16 years. And as much as I would love BYU to be undefeated when they come here in a few weeks, I think Utah rolls BYU today. And I think it starts the path of a rematch with us in the Big 12 championship. I think Utah wins 31-14.
All right, that brings up the game of the day for Red Raider Nation. Number 7, Texas Tech travels to Tempe, Arizona to take on the unranked Arizona State Sun Devils. Lane, what do you got?
I think even with Will starting today and, losing Skylar Go-Howard, we have just so much depth on this team. And our defense is just way too much for a very injured Arizona State team, especially on the offensive line. I think we run the ball effectively once again, hit the occasional deep ball from Will Hammond. I think he's going to make plays with his legs as well. I think Arizona State, they do keep this one close all this game, though, because this is basically their whole entire season. Their backs are against the wall. I think they give us a fight until the very end, but I think in the fourth quarter we pull away and Tech wins 34-21, and we're going to be ranked in the top 5 next week.
I totally agree. Number 7, Texas Tech, top 10 team in the country. I think they're top 5 next week, like you said. I do think that this is a defensive battle for a little bit of this game. I think that Texas Tech might struggle offensively at the beginning, not really opening up the playbook, and I think that Arizona State's going to struggle for almost the entirety of this game. I do think they catch a little bit at the end. I think that Texas Tech really runs away with this. I think 38-21 is our final score here. I think Texas Tech pulls off another absolutely dominating game and really solidifies themselves as not only the Big 12 favorite, but a national title contender after today's game. And it's going to be a fun one to watch.
Absolutely.
Thank you all for joining us and watching the Campus Live Sports Show here today, live at GolfSuites here in Lubbock, Texas. It's been a great show. It's going to be an even better game. Make sure y'all tune in here in 2 weeks as we come back here for a away game against Kansas State. Make sure y'all come join us for the game, as there will be deals. We know game day deals, extra large pizza, pitcher of beer, and an hour of golf for just $50. $2 draft beer, as well as the big Paint Doctor giveaway, $200 Visa gift card, $75 to Red Robin, as well as merchandise Texas Tech related. Make sure y'all come out and join us. Again, thank you to Roofmaster of Lubbock for powering this. Any roof needs, Roofmaster of Lubbock got you. And Lane, thanks for joining me again, man.
Yeah, it's been fun.
All right, make sure you also tune into the Guns Blazing podcast on our YouTube channel. We have 2 episodes out, and we'll be doing this weekly. Make sure y'all tune in if you like listening to me and Lane talk. And as always, wreck 'em.
Wreck 'em.